Nice. I think we're good. Chelsea, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you. How are
Thank
you?
you. Thank
Things
you for
going well?
having me. I'm
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
I know. It's we were just saying it's impeccable timing that this happened. I have always been meaning to message you and try to get you on, and then other teammates of yours or friends of mine. I'm good friends with Dave Durrani, so he was like, "You got to have her on." And then sure enough, you were like, "I'm coming back." And I was like, "Got to do it now." First of all, though, how has everything been like with you guys in coronavirus and your lockdown time? Are you guys doing all right?
It's tough. I mean, it's tough for everybody. I'm not going to lie. It was just, it's weird. This is like so unprecedented to just like have to completely shut down your business.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, nobody's can come in. We're cleaning the most we've ever cleaned the gym before, which isn't a bad thing, that part of it, but it's still, it was a lot and it was hard and it was just, it's been tough for everybody to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. We made a pretty long running joke in our staff. We were like, the pits are closed for now because we're cleaning. We're like, well, the pits weren't the cleanest before coronavirus. So it's probably good that we rethink this situation of training.
Yes.
But yeah, it's weird, man. It's hard. I mean, we're 6 weeks back into our return and like, it's bizarre, like keeping people apart and cleaning the beam so much. And like, the way you got to navigate that stuff, it's really challenging. I feel for gym owners because it's hard. You can't have rec classes. It's hard to have camps. And that's a lot of money. And I feel bad for people.
It is. It's super tough. Nothing is like, yeah, you do the soft opening and it's like, nope, this is different. This is different. We got to figure this out better. It's such a different, there's so much more thought that goes into it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's we were talking about this with my boss, Eva. She was saying that it's awful. Obviously, we don't want coronavirus, but it's also like the pause maybe we needed to reevaluate what we're doing with our, not just in gymnastics, but in our life about where's our time going? Where's our money going? Where's our energy going? And I had a lot of big conversations about that with myself about like, maybe I need to think twice about how this is all happening, so.
Yes, I am a firm believer that positives can come out of almost any situation, but this could be one of them, kind of slowing it down, taking a breather. Like you said, what is important, what isn't.
Yeah. And also in our little bubble of gymnastics, I think we're seeing some things we'll talk about later that are happening. And I don't know if we didn't have a pandemic and eyeballs and attention, if we would ever really be having these conversations. If the Olympics were still going on right now, I think I don't know if we'd have the press around important issues related to the pandemic or Black Lives Matter or Athlete A, all this stuff. So maybe it's good. Maybe it's what we need.
I think it is a good thing to just kind of have I don't want to say it's the only reason, but it's a solid reason that things and conversations are happening. And like you said, there is more of a focus on it. And there's just, because we're pausing, it is easier to have some of the harder conversations instead of the focus being on, training and the Olympics and everything like that, where things kind of get skated over. But now there isn't the Olympics happening and there is time and athletes are feeling comfortable about speaking out, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get to that stuff at the end. But first, the real people want to know, let's talk about adult gymnastics. What's going on, man? So I have so many questions. I'm like your super fan because like we're the same age and I'm like, this is amazing. But my first question is, how did you get here? I feel like you started a fitness challenge and you're like, I'll do double level layout.
It's crazy. Especially in the last weeks and then even just few months, things have escalated super quickly and more than I have ever imagined, taking this.
Yep.
Because I've talked to so many people and it's just truly at the beginning of March, I was just I'm just having fun in the gym. This isn't serious. This is purely for the joy of doing it, which it still is.
Yeah.
But it's just it keeps happening and I keep coming in and I keep going into the gym. And that's what it is. It started out as a fitness challenge. It started out as fun of getting back in shape after having my kids. And then it just lit that competitive fire again because we were conditioning and competing every week. And then I wanted to get stronger and get better to hold my own all the time. But then I felt good.
Yeah.
It felt awesome. My body felt good. My body was changing. I was getting stronger and I was happier. And then it was once I got into this decent physical shape, I'm like, well, why don't I try flipping? I did the hard part. The hard part was getting here.
Right, yeah.
The hard part was getting in shape and being patient with it and not trying anything drastic or any kind of crazy diet, because I didn't do any of that. I literally took an entire year of going slow and working out and seeing this pretty awesome transformation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. And then I just started flipping. I was like, this is great.
Yeah. I was stalking through all of your YouTube videos because I'd watched a whole bunch of them, but I wanted to like really know more. And I just think it's so funny. It's awesome. And it's funny how like your support network is this weird mix of like egging you on as like an older sister, but then they really care about you. And I actually cried, like all laughed out loud. Your dad, when he started his Instagram channel, he's like, look at this. I got 136 followers. I was like, oh my God, that's my dad. That's the exact same thing. Like, it's awesome. But then you have, what's your teammate's name who goes to Oshkosh?
Radia.
Yeah, she's like this weird sassy sister of yours. It's like, all right, do it. Like, get your grips on. And I'm like, oh, all right, okay.
She is awesome. We have a really great dynamic, and I'm going to miss her so much when she goes back to college. And this is the first time like we've truly, like, she's been in the gym forever, but this is like the first time we've truly just been like working out and together at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's been super great for both of us.
Yeah, for sure. And then also you have like, obviously at the gym, you have a cheering section, you have your kids that are there, you have all the other kids in the classes and stuff. Like that must be, I don't know. I feel like that's a good boost to be like, I'm really nervous for this full. I was watching that video, but I feel like you got like a couple girls clapping. You're like, all right, I got it.
It is. It's super helpful. And the girls are awesome. And I think they're just like, oh my gosh, like what? Wait, she was coaching us? No, what is she doing? But it's so sweet, and it's so awesome, and it makes me feel really good when they clap, even sometimes if it's a bad one. I'm like,
yeah. I remember like my mom back in the day, like, oh, you did so good with your flippy tumble. I'm like, yeah, Mom, I fell on my face, but thank you for your support. I appreciate your applause. But was there like a distinctive moment where like you had like in the gym or elsewhere, you're like, oh, this is happening, because I feel like, again, I was like watching the timeline, it's like 9 months, fitness. And like one day you were just like adult gymnastics journey. And then like the whole decision came recently. Was there like a trigger that you had a conversation with your dad, or was it just like organically?
That was pretty organic. I mean, we did talk a lot, but that really was not planned, like to do it that day, to be like totally whatever. It just that day just kind of happened. We were kind of talking about it leading up to it. And my mom and dad are like, why not go for it? Like, just like really, like, why not? At this point, you are committed to coming in 3 full days a week, and you asked your dad to now start coming in on when he doesn't have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Come in and coach you because you want to get better. So what is holding you back from at least trying to say, let's see what happens?
Yeah. And I have to ask, I guess, personally, but also I know that people kind of in our age bracket are asking, like, how do you balance it all? How do you balance kids and working out and doing business stuff and coaching? Like, I'm constantly struggling with that.
I'm still struggling. And if I let you know the secret, I will tell everybody in the whole world.
Where's the fountain of youth? We know you have it. You hit it. It's in the math. Give it to us. It's unfair.
No, it's a crazy balance. I do have a really strong support system with my family. My mom helps a lot with the kids. My dad helps a lot with the kids. They're at my sister's today. Thursday is their day with Auntie. Or some days they're in here, and we have a sitter that comes and watch them here so they can be in here and I can see them and still do my stuff. Cool. But it truly takes a village. But it's just trying to navigate. And some days I feel like I'm barely treading above water, and other days like, yes, I nailed it. Or, and then some of the too, I think it was like 2 days ago, I was more excited about any of my gymnastics that I got up, I got all the dishes done, and I had dinner in the crock pot ready to go. And I was like, I won today. That was my excitement. I was like, I did it.
Yeah. Grocery store in an hour. Take that, Whole Foods. Yeah. And I'm sure many people, I don't know. Have you given other interviews talking about like the nuts and bolts of your training, or not really just yet?
A little bit. We've gone into it because I've actually done a ton of interviews this week. I'm slightly overwhelmed. Sure. But yeah, I'm still only doing gymnastics 3 days a week.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. And I feel like super proud. Crazy good. It is crazy good of all the progress that I've made and continue to make with only keeping up that schedule. So yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday are the days that I do gymnastics. Tuesday, Thursdays are like my off days, but I condition I warm up and condition with my team, and then I break off and do a little bit, maybe like another hour's worth. So Tuesday and Thursdays, probably about 2 hours worth of strength and conditioning and exercises.
Yep.
And I'm still keeping the numbers low. So I don't usually exceed 5 ever. Unless like the first day I tried like my branding, my front half on the high beam, I think I got like 6 or 7 because I did a couple extra on the laser beam, a couple extra on the floor to get ready.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I've not exceeded 5. And bars, I'm at like 3 max probably of anything except for like the giants and things like that. But it's keeping those numbers low, and just focusing on quality. And that's like what it was before too, because that question actually just came up to me today, is like quality versus quantity. And that's how it was before, but we were still doing higher numbers when I was younger, still striving for that quality. But like right now, I'm like, just yesterday, my Arabians were super off on the floor, super off on the laser beam. And I was like, do you want to even do one on the high beam? I was like, I want to do one. And I made that one count. And that one was better than doing 3 that fell.
It's just, there's so many questions, because obviously I think it's something that your journey represents. And even yourself, Michaela Skinner, Trinity Thomas, everybody's like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't a 16 to 18 thing. And we're jumping ahead way, but it's just so important to talk about now, is like, there's a radical change happening right now. Is like, do you think that you can only do those low numbers because you have so much experience and because you've been through so much? Or do you look back at like 11 to 13, and you're like, wait a minute. What are your thoughts on that?
That's one of the things that has been in my mind a lot, specifically this last week, because I've gotten so many kind of questions about that. I feel like it can be both. And I feel like some of these things I'm super confident on, even though I got nervous the first few times to try it, but then it's like, okay, I got this because of all the numbers that I did do before.
Sure.
But then on the other hand too, how many of those numbers were needed? Do we know? We don't know. And I don't know if that's something that's easily answered.
Yeah.
But I'm still a firm believer in the quality over quantity. I don't think it benefits anybody to do 10 okay turns versus 2 or 3 that absolutely rock that skill.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. And I think, I mean, I obviously am under a lot of microscope as well because of the work that I'm doing, especially in the research world. And I think there's a middle ground here between the two extremes. You're an extreme. You're an amazing extreme of, I've been so far, I've done it, and it's coming back kind of easy. But I think I think we're in the middle right now, which is not optimal. I think the other extreme is going a little slower, way more time on drills and strength conditioning and progressions, and really mastering technique. Nick Ruddick has taught me so much about this, about how you can do so much work on a Ginger or on a pack or whatever it is well before you actually do those numbers when they're older. So like, why don't we all just brake pedal a little bit, develop the athletes, get them safely through puberty, make sure they're healthy, and then 14 and up, we can be like, all right, let's do these things on hard. So, I mean, I work with a lot of college gymnasts who are like seniors right now or juniors, and they're just like, my ankles hurt so bad. And like, I just doing your ankle fulls when I was 12, or my first double pike was when I was 12. And it's like, do we need to start double pikes when we're 12? Like, I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard, complicated question.
It is. It is going to be hard. It's going to be hard to convince a lot of people that might not be, like you said, you don't really need to do that. The second, like, great, you could have the ability to do it and the ability to do it safely, and that's awesome. But is it absolutely necessary? And that's kind of one too that we're trying to find a balance in our club, and even a balance with talking to some of the parents too, because it's really hard. And I'm hoping, because there's begun another shift in colleges and being able to commit to colleges so soon, but there's this push to be a level 10 or to push to get those hard tricks because you need to commit to a college by the time you're 12. Well, no, you really don't. Yeah. And just because you can do it when you're 12 doesn't mean your body's going to hold up, or that you might not even stick around until you're 18. We don't know, because you were pushing too hard, too fast. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And there's a lot of different, like, kind of, I think one thing that's really important to highlight is that the negative news gets so much attention right now, and a lot of it is needed, right? But also, I think there's so many people that don't realize 80% to 90% of the gymnastics world is amazing and really good people who are doing the right thing. And I feel like we get this perception that like we're these monsters coaching these kids and putting them through training. It's like, most of us are good people, I promise. Right. There are still there's a ton of good people in gymnastics. There's a lot of great coaches who, build a solid environment and a wonderful place for these kids to go and to grow up. And I it hurts so bad to know that so many people have had these terrible experiences, because it can be such a wonderful sport and teach you so many things and so many lessons that you can take with you for the rest of your life, and just give you this great foundation. And my wish, of course, that's, tall order, but it's just to everybody to be able to have fun and, achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I think it's so important right now that we just need to do a lot of listening and a lot of learning from people's experiences, because obviously there's a range here. But I think some of the most important people to talk about are people like yourself, who have been kind of around when, we're not going to dive into it, but the old guard, they call it. You went through a system that very much had what was maybe concerning, and now you're living a world as a coach where it's very, very different. I think like Mez from Australia and Hannah Whalen are all examples of people who are like, okay, I know what I don't want to do, and as a coach, here's what I'm trying to change. I think it's so important to listen to everybody and just leave our egos at the door and just have an open discussion about like, okay, let's put our model on the shelf and brainstorm some new ideas, because right now it's really reactionary, defensive.
Well, it is. It's like, how can we make it better? And that's like one of the things that I try to, well, like when you said leave your ego at the door, like when I'm trying to coach, I'm just trying to be there and encourage, because like I've done it. I know what it is. I've accomplished anything that I could possibly want to accomplish in this sport. And it's like their turn. It's their journey. And I always, again, too, these kids walked in the door because they wanted to try it. They stayed because they love it. Let's not push them out because of you. It's like, don't be the person to push them out the door or to turn it into something that they don't ever want to do again. That's awful.
Yep. This is my favorite quote, and I was saving for later, but I listened to all these episodes you had, and this is the best one. It's like some random like fluff piece too. You said, it's about them. It's about their goals, not me. I try to be a positive force because I know how hard the sport is. If that's a college scholarship, that's great and an amazing goal. But if it's not, and they just want to have fun, that's amazing too. And I was like behind my computer, I was like, yeah, give me a round of applause. Like, that's it, man. That's the definition of what it is. And I think the problem that happens is goals change. You start off like, ooh, let's go to junior national team, or like, ooh, let's get a scholarship. And then they get to 14 and they're like, nah, I like my friends, or like, nah, I like cheerleading, or no, I like, and they're like, the coach is still, the parent is still pushing them in the opposite direction. And it gets real weird.
Well, it does, because sometimes, yes, the coach has a different goal than the kid. The parents have a different goal than the kid, and nobody is on the same page. And the only person that's suffering is the kid.
Yep.
And they're the reason that we're there. They're the reason that we have this job. They're the reason that we're coaching, is to coach these kids. But we need to be better listeners at really what they want. What do you want to get out of this sport? And that's what it is. Like when I'm coaching too, I try to do like I said, be the positive force, because it's a hard sport. It is really hard. And that's one thing I love about the conditioning, because I lead conditioning every single day and I am in there doing it with them.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that every coach has to be in there doing it with them. But if you can like make it a little bit lighter and try to, just be enthusiastic about it, I just kind of hope it rubs off on them. It's such a huge part of gymnastics is the conditioning and the exercises. But also too, like, I don't ever get upset if they get a bad turn or if a skill is off or anything like that, because it's hard and they're doing it. And at the end of the day, is it going to matter that they didn't hit a series in one practice?
Yep. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this lately, especially as many gyms are trying to actively turn over their culture. And I think gymnastics is such a do it versus say it sport. Like we have all those teammates like, I'm gonna do it right now. I'm gonna do it. You're like, okay, man, let's go. Like, let's figure it out. I think that mentality trickles so much into our culture, whereas the kids stare at you all the time. They're watching you like hawks. They're watching their parents. And so they believe what you do and not what you say. So if you say how important health and wellness and working out is, but then you're sitting on a block yelling at them while they do rope climbs, where's the empathy there? And I think the kids turn off. I'm like, okay, whatever. You come do these floor routines and then ask me to go do more bar routines. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. So, and that's part of it too. Like with the conditioning, like I don't ever give them an assignment that I wouldn't do myself. Doesn't mean I do it with him every single day, but I'm like, I'm never going to get up there and do 20 rope climbs. Are you freaking kidding me? Why would I give it to children who are half my age?
Yeah.
There's no reason.
Yeah, I've had some moments. I test the workouts that I give, especially like the cardio ones. I test them beforehand. I get halfway through. I'm like, oh, cut the reps in half. Cut the reps in half. So hard. And I work out. I try to work out once a week with our optional team. And like, I'm dying, man. I'm dying. And I'm like, I can't imagine going back and doing more events after this. And like, yes, they're younger, and yes, they're whatever you call it is, but they also have school. And they also have many other things going on, and they're actually growing. So a lot of their energy is going towards that. It's like they're not these endless wells of more and more and more. And I feel some kids need a kick in the butt intelligently, like, hey, you have goals. These are your goals. Just kind of move it along a little bit. But 95% of the kids are working as hard as they can. And you're like, okay, 5 more. And you're like, oh my, what? I can't do 5 more.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's today we were doing block pushes. I'm like, didn't sound bad in my head. Then I'm doing it with him. I'm like, okay, we're not doing that one again.
Yeah, I've had those written on the board. And you're like, oh, it looks so innocent. This isn't that bad at all.
Right.
Like, look at the clock. You're like, oh, we're 2 minutes late, guys. Let's wrap it up. We gotta go. That's what I want to say too. Is I think something I respect you so much for is you seem like you're not afraid to say like, oops, or like my bad, or like I don't really know. Let me figure this out. And I think that is a huge problem in the gymnastics world too. Is people are so afraid, whether it's ego, whether it's not, they can't say, I'm sorry, or I don't know, or let me think about that and ask somebody else. And I think that's a massive problem that we have to deal with.
Oh, I agree. Especially as coaches. Like if you're, I don't feel like we should ever be done learning. And I don't feel like there's any coach out there that knows the answers to everything. And we shouldn't stop, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask or to be like, I really don't know. Let's brainstorm, or let's try to figure out together. Or, hey, I'm going to call my dad because I've not come across that before. Yeah. And I've reached out to one of my good friends who's a tramp and tumbling coach, and he's been helping me a lot with drills. My dad could care less. He's like, now he actually starts texting him. He's like, hey, and he texted like Justin before I can even show him one of my new skills. But it's just like, and he's not threatened by it or is like, no, you can't ask another coach. It's my job. And it's just like, if your goal is to get the best out of each gymnast to help them achieve their dreams, why shouldn't you ask for help?
Yep. And I think that goes a long way too with another neighbored conversation that we're happening in the gymnastics world, especially when it comes to strength conditioning and nutrition. I think that there's a lot of coaches who are maybe unintentionally, not mean, but are just like dancing a little bit too far out of their lane. And when they should really be asking, because like nutrition's a full-time job, strength conditioning is a full-time career. And I think for so long in the gymnastics world, it's just been, we dump too much on the coach and say, you have to be a nutritionist and a mental health coach and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard. So like we should start moving more towards the college model, I think.
Well, it is. Cause it's like, there's a lot of times that comes up, or, you know, we're dealing with something that's a little bit more on the mental side. It's like, we probably should talk to a sports psychologist, because that is not my, I don't know that at all. I know what I've been through, and I can tell you my experiences, but that doesn't make me an expert in the field or even be able to help you properly. And I've learned so much about strength and conditioning, but a lot of it is just what works for me. It might not work for all of my kids. We've been doing really great with it, but it just might not be for everybody. But I've learned what works for me, and it's been awesome. But it took me 32 years to figure it out.
Yep. Yeah, and I think a lot of this comes down to it. This always comes back to the same thing, is people are just so scared of the fear of the unknown and the fear of social judgment. That's exactly why I was being an egotistical coach and pushing the kids too hard. Is because when I went to the meets, I was nervous about what other coaches thought about me. Like, oh, are they throwing releases? Or like, oh, there was a lot of gossip, and it was insecurity. I was very insecure, and I had a big ego because of that. And so I think if people are looking to overhaul their gym, they should maybe start with themselves and figure out like, okay, what really makes me nervous? What am I insecure about? Because if you tie your worth to like what you do every day and your choices and who you are as your person, it doesn't matter if the kids follow to me. It doesn't matter if what other goals change. Like you can rest on what you have inside of you and not like what the kids do. That's like a terrible thing to set yourself for.
Well, exactly. And that's a huge part of the problem of, you know, kind of what got us to where we are today is the reflection of the kids' performance is how you are as a coach. And that's not necessarily it. They could have just had a bad competition or this or that. But again, if you're driving them out of the gym, you are probably doing something wrong.
Yes. Yes. If there are patterns in your gym, whether it's everyone has ankle injuries or everyone has a back issue or everyone's complaining about this, or there's a mass exodus of like a certain level at your gym,
Mhm.
maybe it's time to look inward and be like, maybe there's some head scratching that should happen here. And
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think it's a complex discussion. It's hard. It's very messy. It requires a lot of personal development and conversations with yourself. But I think we all agree that the sport has so much potential to do amazing things. And I think we owe it to the kids to do a better job as parents, as coaches, as medical providers, as everybody.
I agree.
Yeah. Back to your training, because I forgot this and I know that some people want to know. Do you have a structured training, or like do you have set things like events per day, or is it more you go and you're like, I'm kind of sore? Because that was interesting to me too. You said like one day you're like, I'm going to try to do some stuff, and you did a popo and you're like, ooh, I'm really sore, and then you're like, I'll just do tumble track, and you're like, oh wait a minute, I'll just go to the grocery store. Like everyone has that luxury, right? And like kids, but how does it kind of approach in terms of what you're doing?
Yes. So we just really started making like kind of a training plan to follow. But usually now when I come in, I've been starting on vault, I hit beam, then I tumble, and then I do floor. And a lot of it is how my body feels. Like Monday, I felt pretty great. So I was able to get through everything that I wanted to get, what my dad asked me to do. Wednesday, I was sore. So I didn't tumble at all, and just did layouts on vault and just like did lower numbers on the high beam just because, and did a little bit more on bars because it was my legs that were sore. So it's to being totally okay with listening to my body and resting it when I need to, because that's what it was like that one when you said when I just left and went to the grocery stores when my hamstring was sore.
Yeah.
And I know from past experience that we don't mess with hamstrings because they are so touchy. They can just flip on you and just be like, okay, I'm strained, I'm pulled, whatever.
And I can't walk.
Yeah, and just like one turn. So that's what it was. And that took just that little, I'm sure it was just like a small strain, but it took 5 weeks for me to not feel any kind of pull when I was doing most of my things. And I just started this week and a little bit last week doing popas. I tried the front aerial again for the first time in those like 6 weeks. But it was just taking the time to fully let it heal.
Yeah.
And being okay with that. Like it was totally okay. Like I was bummed that I couldn't do the skills, but it wasn't just like, oh my gosh, it was just letting it. I didn't want to have a bigger issue. I didn't want to be out for a year because that's what happened when I was 12.
Yep.
I missed an entire year because of a hamstring, because it was like, oh, it's not too bad. Then we kept pushing. It's not too bad. Okay, well, now you tore and it fractured the bone. So that's a big issue.
Yeah, that's serious. And I definitely want to come back to the injuries thing, especially now. But it seems like you have, like, you have experience and and you're okay with your own self. Like, like, no big deal if I don't do 5 of these or whatever it is. And I feel like you also have an amazing support system. Your dad's not like jumping on you if you don't do something. You're 32 now. It's different than when you were 12. But kind of relating this back to what we can learn from the situation and kind of in our now current day of gymnastics is, do you feel, because I think a lot of coaches are well-intentioned and parents are, but the kids are so hard on themselves. The kids are the ones who are in their own head with judgment and saying, I have to do it. I can think of a lot of a few of the college girls we work with that are going back to school, and they're doing crazy numbers right now because they're worried about going back in their spot or whatever it is. And we're like, yo, just calm down. Like, you don't even know if it's a season this year. So do you think it's more about teaching the kids how to not judge themselves and be safe in their own head with, like, if I'm sore today, don't push it, I'll come back tomorrow? Or is it the support system of the coaches, parents need to instill that in the kids and be their positive force?
I think it's both, because we do have conversations with them. Please come to us if you're feeling sore or this or that. And we've had some, a couple with the hamstring. I'm like, okay, you're done.
Yeah.
We're not doing any more splits today. We're not. And it's just like, I'm like, no, you're not doing it today. I'm sorry. It's not worth it.
Yep.
To do a couple split jumps today or to do your front aerials today, to not be able to do them tomorrow, the rest of the week, or 2 more weeks. So it's just like, nope, you're done. So it's trying to find a balance like that, and to let them know that it's okay to come with you with things, but then again, it's okay to not do it. Then you can go work on a different part of your body, or you can still be here or be around or do dancers on beam, but you don't need to do those today.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think this goes back to kind of the what you do and what you say, right? If you say you really care about the long term and taking it slow and skipping meets if they're having an issue. But then when rubber meets the road and somebody's back starts to hurt, another kid sees you giving them kind of a stiff, I'm like, oh, whatever, just go do what you can, or like just suck it up, just keep like, well, that kid who saw that interaction is going to internalize that, but then they're also going to talk with their friends about their behind the back, like my back's sore, like, oh, I can't tell her, like she yelled at Susie when she said her back was sore. Like those little micro events, I think, are what build the culture for it.
Oh, they do, just like you said, because they see it. They kids see a lot more than we think they do, and they take in everything. And just they know that even so much more now with being a parent. They see everything.
Yep. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just like with your kids, probably when they see something that you do, and you're like, oh no, don't repeat that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think I also saw your interview with Scott Reed, I think it was. You were talking about like a lot of things that were different now. And it seems like along with what we're talking about, you have a lot more like investment into just like your recovery and like going by how you feel. And I don't know, is that a situation where you're older and you are an adult and you can make those decisions for yourself? Or is that something that like we should learn as coaches working with young kids now about giving them more of a voice and changing training if they don't feel super great? And I think the podcast we had this week was Justin, who worked under Mihai Bresh, and said that like when his kids come from another practice, if they do a sport and their legs are dead, I'm not going to have you do floor routines. Like it's just not safe. Like, is that something that can happen in the younger levels, or is that like you only do that because you're an adult now?
No, I think that's something that can happen in the young levels as well. And that's even when I start the girls with our conditioning, I try to ask them, how are they all feeling? And if the consensus is that they're sore, maybe from something we did on Monday, we're not going to hit our legs hard again today. We just won't, because it's like, okay, we're going to condition hard and then they're going to try to tumble. No way. So it's just, trying to like open the lines of communication. But that's like, again, what we've gone back and forth from, keeping them open and listening and understanding, and maybe modifying something for someone instead of saying, oh, you're fine, just go figure it out.
Yeah.
And because like you said, the teammates will see that and then they might not come to you. So it's really trying to keep in those lines open and listening and being empathetic and being like, okay, then we'll figure it out today. If you can't do this today, that's okay. Because we don't need an injury or something else or to create a new problem just because you're sore.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And also you already said it already beautifully, but there's so many things you can work on in gymnastics. There's multiple different skill categories and movements, and do a double session of bars one day with technique. But I think it comes down to you as a coaching staff making that a normal thing, that if somebody has an issue, they can move on, and not making it, I don't know what the word is, but like a stigma around if somebody has an injury and like, oh, like this is my biggest pet peeve of like, here's your list, go off in the corner, good luck, come back to me when you're healed. Like, oh, these injuries are so annoying. It's like, well, maybe something that's changed in the program that we need to think about, right? Like keep them involved in the rotation or somehow.
Right. Because there's so many drills and side stations. So if you have to set something else up for someone who may not be able to do everything, those drills are going to benefit the rest of the group anyway.
Yes.
Like if there's something good for the girl whose ankle is a little bit sore or this or that, and they're doing these side stations, why can't the entire group do the side stations and just filter in? Because it's going to be beneficial to them as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's super important that, and we've talked about this, and I kind of want to talk about injuries, then food as well. But like, you have to normalize all these things as part of your team culture. About these are all the things that we do. Like we talk about recovery, we talk about sleep, we talk about food, we talk about injuries, because it's weird if you never talk about it and you never address it, and then all of a sudden somebody gets hurt and you start like talking about it, right? Somebody feels very singled out. So I think the education that you're speaking about, and also like the trying to make it a holistic approach to the wellness of the athlete, and also performance can still happen. But I feel like if you switch the conversation towards performance and scores and skills, and then you're like, oh yeah, by the way, keep you healthy, I feel like that sends a very negative message.
Yeah, I agree.
On the injuries thing, I know you've had I'm sure you're hyper aware of, you're a more seasoned gymnast this time around. And as someone who is the same age as you, I like demonstrate drills. I'm like, don't tear my Achilles, don't tear my Achilles. So how have you approached all of that? Is it just like, you're very slow, careful? Do you work with people? It's like, what's the whole deal around that?
Yes, it's been taking it slow. And this time around, the biggest thing for me was the getting in shape first. Because that was the hardest part for me when I was an athlete. And I've said this now quite a lot in the last few weeks, is this is the longest I've ever been at a certain level of physical fitness.
Yeah.
It's crazy being an elite athlete, but our seasons go up and down, and it was really easy for me to get out of shape.
Yep.
and gain weight and lose muscle and do all that. And then it's like, oh crap, we have a camp in a month. I got to do something. And it was just this like roller coaster of unhealthiness sometimes. And now it is so different. So it was like, I've kind of figured it out, and I figured out like my body and what my body needs and what workouts that I like to do and what I respond to. But then also have kind of relaxed much more around food. And I do eat fairly healthy, but there's no like restricting or anything, or just like feeling super guilty about eating something and then like, oh my gosh, I got to work out. It's just, it's not like that anymore. So it's much easier just like mentally for that aspect of it. And I didn't do any in gymnastics until I got in shape. I wasn't using gymnastics as a tool to try to get into shape, because gymnastics doesn't get you into shape. The conditioning and the exercises and the drills and those get you into shape, because gymnastics, well, you know, it's not an aerobic sport. It's not going to do all this. Like just doing the skills isn't enough. It's doing the other stuff. So once I was able to do all the hard stuff, I felt, or do all of the in shape and the workouts, I felt really good. And that's when I was like, oh, I can flip. This is great. I did talk to my physical therapist. She's come in a few times. She actually saw one of the things, you know, when I was talking about doing bars or not, and she texted me like that day. She's like, do you want me to come in and just like,
I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends.
Yeah. So she came in, did, you know, some of the tests and everything, because she just like wanted a baseline. And I had really like great, open and honest conversation with her, because I was terrified to do bars. I'm like, what do you think? I was like, I feel stronger. Everything feels good. But I weigh more. I'm heavier than I was in 2008, but I feel like some of my things I'm flipping higher and I feel good. And she's like, well, it's good. It's muscle. There's more muscle up around there protecting your shoulder, so you have more muscle. She wasn't as nervous about the little bit of extra weight than I was. So it took me longer to be convinced and be like, okay, I can maybe try swinging. So it was just, she was confident with that. I also asked her about my Achilles, because I was super nervous about that. I never had it when I was trouble with them when I was training, but it was just like, okay, I'm a little bit older. But also, you know, was doing a lot of stretching, doing a lot of jumps and like plyometric work anyway. So it wasn't just like I jumped into tumbling or jumped into doing these skills. I was doing exercises, but that was still a genuine fear of mine.
Yeah, it's mine, like walking every day in the gym, so don't feel bad. I'm the same way. I would really like to, if you're okay with it, I'd like to kind of dig in a little bit more into what you're talking about with your relationship with food, because I think that's a very common theme of what's going on with Athlete A and with Gymnastics Alliance, is many people who are saying the practices around food in general, weight, whatever it is, and the comments that were made to them were they were a catalyst to a lot of bigger issues. And so, I mean, I think we talked about a little bit, which is staying in your lane, but we had a very popular nutrition podcast a few weeks ago, and people seem to really spark that. But what have you learned, or like, what did you do to kind of change that relationship with food? Or as a coach, like, what do you think about now when you're talking to athletes? Because I think that people are really, rightfully so, concerned about the conversations they have, but it's so important to feel yourself well and be in good shape and things of that nature. So I guess, what are all your thoughts on that?
It's a lot. And it's still a process for me, because I still am not always like 100% confident with how I look or anything. It's just always like working on that. It's a constant like battle for me to just be comfortable with myself. So I'm still a work in progress, but I'm doing much better than I was. But yeah, it's just, I'm trying to look at it more as like fuel and how I feel, because I can feel a difference in the days, because I did do, I had participated in something a few weeks ago and it was a lot of fun, but I ate a little bit healthier, was a little bit more strict with it for the 3 weeks leading up to it, and didn't really eat any added sugar. And that was probably the most extreme that I've gone, but I still ate every single day. I didn't like restrict anything, but it was just a lot more mindful of what I was putting into my body. And then when I came home, I didn't, because it was over my birthday, I made myself a birthday cake, but that whole week I was so sluggish and just not feeling as good as like, oh, it's all that sugar that I just had again. And it was just like, and it was fine. Like I was totally happy that I was eating it. But then it was just like the week after, I was like, that's why I was feeling so crappy all this week, because it was the sugar.
Yeah.
And I don't think sometimes you fully realize how much it can impact you and impact how you feel until maybe you think back on it, or just go a certain amount of time without sugar and then have it again.
Yep.
And then it's just like, whoa.
I don't know.
And I am so not opposed to treats. Like one of my guilty pleasures is like, I love fruit snacks. I don't know why. And they're not even that good for you, but
because you have kids, that's why.
I do. But it's funny, but it's just having a different like mindset around food, that it truly is your fuel, and it can fully affect like how you feel and your performance, and not even as an athlete, just as a person in general.
Yep.
It can help affect your mood in a positive or negative way. It can give you energy or make you feel sluggish.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've spent over a year that I haven't had any caffeine, and I didn't really have it a lot.
Dude, that's crazy.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't really have it a lot before then, but like my favorite drink was raspberry iced tea, and there was so much sugar in it. Yep. That I just decided to cut it out when I was going like 10 days without sugar.
Yep.
As just like initial, like, let's just see how this feels. And it was just not eating sugar. It wasn't taking out anything else. And that just kind of stuck. And I don't feel like I need caffeine because I have energy.
Yep.
So it was just kind of finding what worked. And before, when I was training, it was just being super restrictive, or thinking I can't have that, or I shouldn't have that. And if I do have that, I feel really bad and I have to go work out, or I really want to have those chips and I shouldn't, but then you do, and then you eat the whole bag, and it's like, oh my gosh. And it's just like this negative cycle, and there's just this negative perspective around food that it's like the worst enemy, and it's not. It can totally be your best friend and help you and fuel you and make you, like I said, have all of this energy and probably heal faster if you have the right approach to it.
Yep.
And it can be really hard and confusing, because when we're in some of these environments, and a lot of mine was learned, and it wasn't from my parents or my coaches, because I was very lucky with all of my coaches throughout my life. But it was seeing other behaviors at camps, and with some of the other girls and their relationship with food and their coaches and how they were talked to. And it kind of rubs off on you, and just having this totally negative perspective around food. And it gets into you, and that's really, really hard to break.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. And I said this on the podcast when they were there, but like, I think the female side of the sport gets attention, but I completely had a disordered eating when I was in college, because my teammates were shredded and I wanted to be in lineup, and I would have done anything that I could have. And like, it took me 10 years, 9 years maybe, of being a medical provider and learning about what was healthy and breaking those myths, because it was the same thing. Mine was less from my gym. Mine was from just mainstream media and seeing other people about like how to stay lean and don't eat carbs and this and that. And I think that it was completely destructive. I think that it actually like cost me a lot of progress in my skills and in injuries as well. And I think that we all as a sport are struggling still with why that kind of stuff has happened, because that seems to be a really big problem for a lot of people. And I had a huge problem with like just like being paralyzed, like you said, of like, I can't eat that, that's bad for me because I'm going to like blah blah blah, or I'll gain weight. And then you go the other way and you eat a ton one week and you're like, oh, why did I eat that, or what did I do? So we all struggle. But I think the educational piece is a huge part of this, but also too, and I hate to like, call out the elephant in the room, but like when people say trash like that, you have to jump on it. You have to say that's not okay. And I feel like from what I've heard, I don't want to dive into names and stuff, but like people say like at some of these camps and at some of these things, and I've seen it firsthand still in the last 10 years working with some of the higher level gymnasts, is like that still slides out with people. Still conversations about what people look like or how much they weigh, or like, oh, if you just lost 5 pounds, you'd catch your pack or you'd catch your Takachev. And it's like, that's awful. That is so not true in a million different ways.
Right. It's not. Yeah. It's really hard. And it's such a hard topic to know like the right way to speak about it, because, on the one hand, there are certain things that you need to be a certain level of physical fitness, or it just makes it easier. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but it might make it a little bit easier. Yeah. And on the other hand, it's having the education and just to know how to talk about it.
Yep.
And a lot of times, like again, as coaches, like I am not a nutritionist. Again, I found out what works for my body. And when we talk to the girls, it's just trying to find a good balance. I've never said to them, no, you can't go have cake. Because they're like, 4th of July weekend, go have fun. But just please drink a lot of water. Stay hydrated.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just figuring it out, or just needing more education on what helps, because and gymnastics is different. Like it's not like swimming or something where they're burning so many calories during a workout, and our diet is going to look a lot different than that. But you still have to find like a balanced diet of what is giving you what you need to get through a workout and to try to stay healthy.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And I think this is something where the pendulum has swung in either direction, right? It's not about the extreme we used to have, which was like hyper restrictive and unhealthy, and the wrong people giving the wrong advice. It should be nutrition, but also you can't ignore the fact that nutrition has to be balanced, and you have to fuel yourself well if you want to be a high level competitive athlete, because the sport is dangerous and the sport is hard, and you have to be safe. And I think its education is a massive part of it. We've already talked about checking your ego and talking with nutritionists and getting them involved, making it a part of your culture, whereas you talk about sleep and recovery and hydration and stress management. And like, by the way, food for fuel is also in that conversation. But I would agree with what you said before too, is that you have to make that something that's not weird to talk about. That's not, whatever it should be, but fuel and performance and fuel and how you feel, I think, are the best ways to go about having this conversation. And this is what the nutritionists all said in the podcast is, well, how do you feel? Do you feel like you have energy to get through a practice? Or like, do you feel like you're doing well? Do you feel like crap all day long? And like, that's how you navigate the waters there sometimes.
Right, exactly. And it could take some like experimenting, and it's just like finding again something that works for you that you like. I am super picky, and I'm not going to eat foods that I don't like. It's just not going to happen. But it's finding something that works for you and stuff that you enjoy eating. Because I will be the first to say I'm not going to just cook a whole bowl of spinach and eat that. That's like never going to happen ever.
Yeah.
Like I'm 32 and I hide it in my smoothies. Like I literally blend spinach and kale with a little bit of applesauce, freeze it, and that goes in my smoothies. So
yeah. And again, this goes back to, as well as leading by example, like parents are a huge part of this equation for young kids, about like, it's really hard for especially a 10 to 16-year-old male or female to try to have these conversations and make changes when they're not grocery shopping and when they're sitting down to dinner and they have to eat whatever's in front of them because that's what everybody buys. So I think that hopefully there's a lot of parents that are going to listen to this too, is that like, okay, reflect on like, okay, am I eating really healthy? Am I working out? Am I trying to be my best attempt? Because that's going to shed better, opportunities for your kids to follow those things. And I can think of a few examples of where somebody has tried really hard to have a better fuel for performance mindset, but the environment at their home was just really tough to work uphill against.
It is that, and that's a whole nother hurdle sometimes is getting, the entire family on board or this or that. And it's going to be hard, and it's not always going to be easy, or it's going to be different. You're going to have to meal plan and take time to do things. But if this is what you want, this is what you want for your kid, this is a huge part of helping them get there. Like it is a huge part when you're in a sport is being able to be physically fit and feel good and get through those workouts. And it's eating the right foods is going to help tremendously.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of facets to it. Obviously, it's not as easy as eat the right thing, or buy the right things and cook them, and it will go into it. As you know, with your kids, I'm sure. Is it true that in parenting there's phases where they only eat like one thing for like 2 weeks straight and they don't want anything else, or is that a lie?
No, it just depends. We're in a phase with my son where he eats like 4 or 5 different things, and it's just like, come on, dude. And then my daughter eats absolutely everything. And I'm like, please stay like this. Please be like my husband and not like me.
Yeah, for sure. I did have to ask, Jessica Oberon wanted me to ask this question, and this is good that she asked it because this is not for me. This is more like you guys in the judging world, but she was wondering if you had any artistic goals for the next quad, because things are changing quite a bit and the artistry deduction. So I'm not going to add much value to this conversation, but she would like to know.
I do want to see some more artistry, because there's been some really, truly like phenomenally artistic routines. But a lot of times they're kind of few and far between. And it's really hard though too, to try to find a balance of building up the score and even just having enough time to do some of these wonderfully artistic movements and routines when you've got to count so many skills, and then you're going to have these connections and get this and get that. And at the end of the day, is it worth it to have like this 10 seconds or whatever long, and especially like in a beam routine of these beautiful movement, or to get that extra skill to build up your score? So I'm hoping there's going to be more of a balance, like a shift in the balance, to try to figure out how we can have it. Because I know that was a big discussion at one of our courses, is more artistic, more, performance quality. But what is like the flip side of that, of how are you going to help us get or into the routines when they still have all of these requirements that they have to meet, and you're still trying to build that difficulty score if they want to be competitive.
Yeah. As you build your routines for like the upcoming, is it going to be more like on the tumbling side, the artistic side? How do you approach that?
I don't feel like I'm super artistic, and I don't really feel like dancing is my strong suit. But I will try to work on it and get better. I feel like I'm a little bit more powerful than this super dancey. But I just love to tumble. I really love to do that. But I feel like my leaps and jumps are pretty decent, and a little bit surprised myself with those. So hopefully I can hold my own in that department.
Building off that, you already said it, but like, are there any skills that you haven't done before that you really would like to try to do, like in this next run? Because like, I watched the video of you doing the Morse stuff. I was like, this is crazy right now. Like, one, your dad is an ultimate hero. He was like, what? Just do it. And you're like, I've never done it ever. And he's like, just go for it. So he's like the positive peer pressure. But did you surprise yourself? Like, did you do a double full in the first one by accident? I couldn't really remember.
Yeah, it was pretty much the double full and then kind of pike over. I really had truly no idea where it was. I'm like, I'm just going to twist and flip and pull and see what happens. But yeah, it did not feel like anything like the tuck double that I've done. It was so different. So I don't know, maybe if I would ever try that again, I'd have to try like the full twisting laid out that way. Try that first to feel that and see if I can get that over before trying it again. Because I can do the double layout full out, like no problem, but it was just different starting with the twist. It was really cool to learn the tuck double because that's something that I've never ever tried before. So that could be really cool to do. I would really also love to do the pike Arabian on the beam.
Yeah,
it is hard. It is difficult, but I've been doing it every day, at least floor laser beam. I've done it off of the beam now, which is pretty cool. But that's kind of like a skill that is like, I love how it looks too. And Arabians I feel like I'm pretty good at them.
Yeah. I remember, back to your first question too, I was not nearly as high level in college, but I do remember at Flip Fest on a tumble track, I just tried to like twist and flip till I hit the ground, and I did like a double and I like flicked my head up and I was like, oh, look at it, I'm facing this way. I got it. This is good. So it's so easy to get lost. With the Arabian on pike, would that be your own skill? Is there any skills, just wanted to know, are there any skills that haven't been done yet that you were trying to name after yourself?
Yes, that's a piked Arabian. Yeah. Cool.
That's awesome. How would an exit scene, huh? To leave and like make it all work out with a storybook ending, like, by the way, that's my skill.
It would be, I don't know, it would just be really cool, because that was something that I was, playing with. I tried it standing a little bit, then tried it out of the back handspring. I was like, I like it. And at first my dad was like, I don't know, it's totally possible in beam. And then I came in and he saw me do it like on the laser beam on the floor, and he's like, oh yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, man, your dad is the real MVP. I love you to death, but your dad is like my favorite character of this whole show, whatever this is. Is like, there's probably gonna be a ton of times when like he like drops sly one-liners that are hilarious, but you're obviously off camera and like you go back and listen. That must be amazing.
Yes, it is. It's funny. It's like, yeah, when did he say that? No, he's so funny. It's just he really makes being in the gym a lot of fun too. He just adds more. He totally knows when to push me and things like that. So that part of it is really cool.
Yeah. Is it easier now when you guys obviously have more separate lives versus back in the day when you guys were always around each other? Is it easier now to kind of handle some of the love push pull that you're matured?
It's easier, right? Well, I don't know. It wasn't too hard back then. I mean, there was days too where it was like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go stand by mom for a little bit because I don't want to be by you right now. But
Yeah.
but if we're truly, if we're working towards the same thing, it's like he's only here because I asked him to be. He's only here because he's doing it to help me to achieve what I want to achieve. He doesn't need to be here. So
Yeah.
he's doing it because he wants to, and he knows, you know, like how to push me and get the best out of me, which is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the alignment of goals is obviously so important, but the other like big overarching theme that I see with like what you're doing now is like, this is truly, it seemed just for fun. And it's just like, you're awesome to be able to do it and it's exciting. But like, I feel like that is a huge lesson. I hope that people listening who are working in the JO and the club level now is like, guys, this is a voluntary thing. This is a choice that they do. And 99.5% of them won't go elite and 95% of them won't go college. So please keep in the back of your mind, like, what are we really doing here? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, why are you doing this? And that's like, people keep asking me, why are you doing this? Like, because it's fun. I'm having so much fun. Like, I really hope like the majority of the people can see that, but they're like, no, really, like, why? Like, no, really, I'm having a blast. Like, this is so much fun. Like, why? Like, there's like no other reason that I would be bringing myself sometimes too when I am sore or whatever. Like, why would I do this 3 days a week now and then continue to condition the other days when I know I only need a couple of days a week to maintain the fitness that I'm at, if that's just all I'm doing? But like, I'm having so much fun.
Yep.
And that's the reason that I'm doing it. And like I said, too, like with the younger kids and stuff who start gymnastics, they start because they want to try, and they do it because they love it. Let's continue to love it and have fun. And add a game or two into training, because it brings out that competitiveness, and you're like, whoa,
yeah,
that was good. I didn't know you could do that good. And it's just like that little bit of competition, or say which team is going to win, and it's just like it like kicks it into gear. So like keep like that fun in it, because you can still be productive while you're having fun.
Yep, totally.
I mean, I know you can, because I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to take away too, is I think there's a lot of common themes in many of the stories from around the world in the Gymnastics Alliance movement is like, it was so fun. And like 11, 12, 13, it started to become about the next meet, the next score, qualifying, my scholarship, my mom wanted this, my coach wanted this. And it was like, okay, this is not fun anymore. This is a chore. This is a job. And I feel like when it starts to shift into that lane is when we really get into hot water. So I feel like there always has to be an element of like, hey, do you really like this before? Like, do you really still enjoy this genuinely? And I'm curious now is, when you were younger and you were training for the elite world, was it just purely on fun, or was there much more just a competitive fire?
It was, a lot of it, I was having fun, and I truly just enjoyed competing. And I enjoyed competing a lot. I loved that part of it. And I did like training. I loved doing gymnastics, but it was a little bit more serious and being like, okay, but the serious was because of my goals. Like, I wanted to do this. I wanted to go for a spot at a world team. I wanted to make an Olympic team, which is why I continued to do it. And like one of the meets that sticks out to me was Olympic trials in 2008, because that should have been like the most, and it was like super tense and high pressure. And it's like, this is like your shot at making the Olympics. But that meet was I look back that had fun at that competition, because I felt I was so confident and so prepared, and everything was just on, that I could enjoy that meet, which is crazy. Like I said, because it was such like of a high pressure situation, but I also was able to enjoy it because I felt so prepared. And it was just like, and again, a lot of that was like my dad and my coach, Lori, dance coach at the time too, also just kind of hung back and weren't all like, oh my gosh, like this is it, you have to do well, like this is all like our chance. No, it was just like,
this is stressful enough.
It was, and they understood that, which was really awesome. They didn't like hold it in. I know they were both stressed, but they did a really good job at not like kind of putting that also onto me.
Their stress on you.
Yes. And that was too, also from Worlds in 2005, because that was my first major competition, like huge major competition that my dad was my coach at. And he walked in and he was a little bit like Like, oh my gosh, like this is rules. I'm like, hey, it's just another meet. And that just kind of made him be like, okay. And he was fine. And it was just like that first initial, and he would have been okay either way, but that was just me saying, hey, it's just another meet, and that's what it is. And then he was totally calm the rest of the time. But it's also too, like, coaches, you can be nervous and that's totally fine, but the gymnast is just as nervous. Don't add to that, because they want to do well. They know, of course they want to do well at a competition.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And something that I think you kind of alluded to, but I think sometimes in the gymnastics world, along the fun conversation, is this your goal? Do you still want to do this? I think as coaches and as parents, sometimes we're scared to ask these questions because we're scared of the answers. We know deep down inside that maybe it's not the same goal and maybe they want to do something different. It's uncomfortable for us, but I think we really have to be okay with goals that change, or pivoting a plan, or not doing this meet because maybe it's not the right time or something like that. And the hard conversation is really uncomfortable because it usually involves yourself a little bit, but at the same time, it's about the athlete. It's about what they want. This is their goal. This is, they're the hero in the journey and we're their guide. This is not the other way around. I think it's really important that people kind of like settle on that point when they stop listening to this podcast.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's hard. And those are hard conversations to have. And it is. And I've seen it with, coaches not being on the same page and parents not being on the same page as their kids. And that's also really, really hard on the kid when the parent has maybe this goal here and the kid is maybe a little bit more here, and the kid is totally fine with that. And that can create then tension between all three, because it's like, who's doing what? And ultimately, again, it's the kid that loses because they're trying to please each person.
Sure.
And trying to figure it out. And then it just gets to be too much. And that's like super unfortunate, because it's something that they did love to do. Hopefully they still did, but then it just gets too hard because there's all these different expectations going around, and it's just like, oh my gosh. So it's really trying to find like a balance, and everybody being okay with what does this child want to do.
Yep. Yeah, and I can definitely weigh in from the medical side. I've had many awkward, uncomfortable conversations in the medical clinic with super high level gymnasts, scholarship, elite, whatever. And like the mom says one thing, coach says that we have this meet here, and the kid just looks at me and they're like, I don't really want to do it. And I'm like, okay, this is your problem is not your shoulder. Your problem is like whatever this is. So can we sort this out first? Because like if I write a plan for you to go back to junior elite and you don't want to do it anymore, it's gonna be real hard to get over this bridge. And it's hard, but like goals change, man. Things change.
They do. And it's like, so it's really important to check in like with their goals and with what you want to do, because it can change. And if it changes, that's okay. But you also have to be okay with that change. But yeah, checking in, and not just like every year making goals. Like, okay, this girl said she wanted to go to college when she was 12. Have you asked her lately? Now. But yeah, to continually talk about like, what are we working towards? What is your ultimate goal? What is your big dream? Let's make little ones in between.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I'm reading a really good book called Helping People Change, which is about how do you help somebody kind of stay motivated and get their goal. And I think it's very applicable to gymnastics, whereas people are always coaching for compliance of like, do this thing, do this skill, here's this score. But in reality, coaching with compassion is more about, here's your goal. You told me you want this. Here are the steps that you need. This is why you have to do all this conditioning. I know it's hard. Like why I'm pushing you to do 5 more. Like if you can map out someone's ideal future for themselves and say like, well, this is how you get there based on what we know. That is way more supported to have good behavior change and a positive coaching relationship, instead of just like, do this because I said so, and that's not going to ever go well.
No.
Think about anytime somebody gives you feedback. Like if somebody attacks you and says, you're not doing this right, fix it now. And you focus on that. Like I'm pretty defensive usually when somebody comes at me that way. So
I do too. I can get a little bit. That's when it's like, well, can you do one a little bit worse? I was like, absolutely. Yes, I can. I will prove it to you. Watch me do them worse.
Yeah. I had the ultimate like 14-year-old like teenage boy mindset. Sometimes when my coach would do that, I'm like, actually, yes, watch me. And he was like, okay, you can leave now. I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. That's my fault. I was disrespectful. Just a few more questions. I think one I plopped into my head as we were talking more, but kind of around this culture change is very important and needed culture change I think we're having is, somebody asked me this question, and I'm curious your thoughts. Do you think that our systems in the US, but also around the world, are a little bit too elite and kind of Division I scholarship focused, and that maybe that's causing unrealistic expectations or guidelines in terms of like what ages we want kids to do certain things at. Because there's a lot of talk right now about changing the women's age to 18 for seniors and then changing juniors, about maybe putting level restrictions or age restrictions on like E passes or D passes, like level 10 when you beat that. So
Mm-hmm.
do you think that's part of the problem, or do you think there's other things I'm not thinking about?
I think it's such I don't know. I feel like it's such like a loaded question because like just changing the age, I don't think will make a difference. Like you said, if you can figure out a way to make a lot of other things fall in line, or this or that, or it's like, because if you know, you can't be a senior till you're 18, but you still don't want them doing these hard skills once it's here, and then they've had 3 more years of pounding before they even can try to be a senior. So I think there would be so many things that would also need to fall into place.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be, like you said, with the idea of restricting certain this or certain skills, not doing D's and E's. And there's a little bit of that. There is, like, for the junior competitions international, they can do the bigger skills, but they only get the E value.
Right.
So it's like, you can do it, but
yes,
it's still,
it's hard. It's the most important yet the most complex conversation we have right now.
It's super complex because there's so many like things, like you said. It's just like, oh, 18, that sounds great, but
yes,
there's still this, there's still that. How do we figure this out? How do we figure that out? And I think that's one that would need to be like a huge conversation with a lot of different people, and getting a lot of input of like, truly, really, how can we make this just better overall for the health and safety of the athletes, and while also being still competitive.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that I think is really important to highlight, is like we are always having this conversation because health and wellness is first, but we want I think that there's so much potential competitive upside to doing things differently with like better recovery or nutrition or whatever. I think we've left so much performance on the table because kids were really overworked and didn't have the best strategy up to the senior age. So I think it's more about performance, which is there. But yeah, there's so many things that have to change. I think you hit the nail on the head, is we need an interdisciplinary team of ex-elite athletes and ex-elite coaches and medical providers and nutritionists to all sit down and make consensus statements, which is what we have in other sports. For baseball has it with pitching and other stuff, but about like recommended training hours and what should you do with those training hours? What's the quality of those hours? Not just how many do you do? Like all those conversations I think really need to happen if we're going to get anywhere. And that requires a lot of work, but I think that there's many people willing to do it.
Oh yeah, it would be, a ton of work. And it could be, a lot of it is still maybe trial and error, but like if we're ultimately focused on, just producing well-rounded individuals who love the sport and can get through it a lot healthier than we have in the past, like why would that not be worth a huge effort to put into it and see what we get out of it? Because like, I know I'm older and it's a little bit harder and I've done all these numbers, but like I said, I'm already making progress with only doing it 3 days a week, but doing conditioning. And it's not like overtaxing conditioning where I'm killing myself 3 to 5 days a week of doing that. But it's finding, a good solid balance. And like you said, we need to have really good basics, a really good foundation, and then we can do these skills and they might be easier. It's again, like, yes, great. You can chuck a double back. Is it safe every single time? We can do these Yurchenko tuck vaults, but how many times are you going to land it? So it's like, yes, truly figuring out the best way to go about doing all this. And it's going to take a lot of smart people to have these conversations and then to break it down and try to figure it out.
Yeah, I think we're all really chasing the optimal dose. I think that's what it comes down to, is like, what's the right amount that will get you towards your goals and progress, but won't cause you to fall apart. And I really think that we need to have a really honest and hard conversation about what we're doing ages 10 to 15, because a lot of research that we're doing now in the college world is saying like a lot of these problems are sparked when we're 10 to 14, when puberty is a chaotic storm and all this stuff is happening. So I feel like if we can do a better job 10 to 15, I think we would see so much better results from 15 to hopefully 30 and beyond.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But yeah, not just being able to get through your college years, but to fully and thoroughly enjoy them and not having to be taped or whatever. And I've seen a few comments like, she doesn't have any ankle tape or this or that. I'm like, no, that like is my goal. I mean, everything feels good right now, but that would be the goal to, to not always have a lingering issue or this or that. I'm not saying that that will never be fully eradicated from the sport, but like I said, maybe we could have healthier and have awesome gymnastics and be able to feel good all the way up until you choose to retire.
Yeah. Well, I think that speaks to almost a big summary point of this entire talk is like, it goes down to being patient, and it goes down to doing more work in the basics, the boring stuff, the strength, the conditioning, the basics of technique. Like, I think that's really the hard thing. We need great coaches to help teach those basics and strength conditioning to coaches who are trying to learn more, but it's the harder, longer, more boring path. And I think that that's an art of many great coaches, is they find a way to make that part of fun training and make that part of what they got to do. Because I see a lot of really sad cases where people who are impatient jump steps and they get a really bad injury, and then it kind of just spirals downhill, and they're stuck with, just 2 rolls of tape on their ankles every day, or, so much stuff. And it's really sad to see.
It is. It's super sad, and it's really hard. And like you said, just finding like that balance, but then also too, coming back to how we figure that out, or how do we find a balance to know that you're making progress, or not have kids, coaches, parents being hyper, well, she should be able to be doing this because, I'm 10 to 15 and this is when we start looking at colleges. But like ultimately, what is the goal? To know that it's okay from everybody, like in the community, that we don't have to rush this, and we should be pushing technique, overthrowing these big skills, because in the end it will pay off. And that, I think that is something that will be hard, but not impossible to get everybody to buy into eventually, that this is what matters. And again, it's maybe making it a little bit more fun sometimes, or putting games into it where it's like, this is a technique, this is going to get you that really awesome double back, but this is what we need to do right now in order to get there safely.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I think that is really the summary of all these points. There's a lot of discussions going on right now about what to change. Is it policy? Is it the national bodies? Is it the individuals? And I think really anything is going to come down to changing the coaches and the parents and the humans that are involved. Like, if they don't buy in and see why it's so important, nothing will matter. There'll always be people that are going to bend the rules and find a way around it. And so I think it really takes people having that emotional connection to, we are in this together. This is all of us to make our sport better. The FBI is not going to do it. This person's not going to do it. They have a job to do to hold people accountable who have really done terrible things. But if we want the culture to change, it is us from the inside out, not anybody coming on top of us. And I think you owe it to your athletes to help the 5 kids that you work with every day have an amazing experience all the time. And if one wants to go to cheerleading, and one wants to go to a scholarship, and one just wants to sit there and jump in the pit, that's awesome. That's great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's great.
I guess my last question is, you've probably had a lot of things on your mind lately, but if looking at the world of gymnastics right now, if there's anything that you had a magic wand and you had everybody's ear of coaches and parents and national bodies, is there something that you would really love, you wish they would see more or know more about?
I guess one of the things I wish is to know that you can be successful in a positive environment, and you can be happy, you can enjoy training. And it will be hard, it will be tough, but you can also be in a positive environment and be successful. And I do want everybody to know that, because you can. You can. I'm an example of that. I was, I was positive. I was in a very positive environment from the beginning, with, in both my personal, all the clubs that I was, or not all the clubs, but the 2 clubs that I've been in. And also I want to be everybody to be able to work together and to listen, and to try to continue to move forward and change things for the better. And it's so important to listen to these voices, to figure out how we can change and make it better for every single person, so that every single kid that walks through your doors, and whenever they decide to walk out, they are still happy. They loved it. They loved their experience, no matter what it was, but that they enjoyed it.
Yep. Super well said. I think it's a very good place to kind of wrap things up. So what is, I know what people really want to know is, what's on the plan for the next, 6 to 12 months as you make your way up towards Tokyo?
Just to keep going. I'm super excited to see where this journey takes me, and to see like, what can I what I can accomplish and do with a little bit, different styled training that I've done before, because I plan to keep it this way, the 3 days a week on, 2 off for as long as I can, and to keep making progress that way. And hopefully, I don't know. We're just going to see. I'm super excited about this because I'm having so much fun, and I want to continue having fun with this journey.
Yes, I agree. I think that's the best way to keep it, is just enjoy the process, and whatever happens, let the chips kind of fall where they fall,
Yeah.
Well, Chellsie, thank you so much. You are an inspiration to all of us, and I think you're an amazing shining light in the world of gymnastics right now. So please keep up anything, and if you need any help from us, just let us know.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dave. This was great.
No problem. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Sounds good.